Welcome to On Texas Football. Time for the Saturday conversation. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Gerry Hamilton of On Texas Football. Gerry, we're going to talk a little Longhorn football and coaching changes. I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Laura Baker, over at Keller Williams and Andy at the Andy Allen team there before we get going. But Gerry, I thought for today's Saturday conversation, probably the hottest topic right now in Longhorn land is the change at running backs coach with Tashard Choice taking the Detroit Lions job earlier this week. Now we're hearing about other possible movements among the coaching ranks at Texas, as well as guys coming into Texas.
Yep.
We talked about that a little bit on Friday morning as well with Aaron Joe, the general manager at Georgia Tech, coming to Texas on Friday. The thought I have here and what I want to get at and talk to people about is I've been doing this. This is my 33rd year covering college sports and recruiting. Okay.
Yeah.
You've been doing it 20, 25 plus.
Yeah.
It is a kick in the you-know-whats when a really good coach and a really good recruiter decide to go elsewhere. Tashard Choice was both of those things.
Yep.
But what's the response to that? The response is not to fold the program.
No.
And so while it may look and appear and feel like a kick, the real key here is what does Steve Sarkisian do in return, right? When Tashard Choice takes another job.
Yeah, I mean, look, Tim Brewster helped Mac Brown recruit a lot of really good players. He wasn't there when Texas won a national championship. He went to the NFL. And things continued on, and the program continued on, and Texas went on to win a national championship, and 2009 was really close to winning another one, right? And then the Colt got hurt. So, yeah, I mean, Mac lost his ace recruiter right when he was building Texas, and things moved forward, and they moved along. So the one thing I think we know about Steve Sarkisian, he's proven at Texas. He's ascended from a coaching hires perspective multiple times. In my opinion, I thought Tashard Choice was an upgrade from Stan Drayton. That's not a knock on Stan Drayton. I thought Chris Jackson was an upgrade from Andre Coleman or Brennan Marion. That's not a knock on those guys. So he has proven. Johnny Nansen, I think, is an upgrade because of how he kind of his past as a defensive coordinator and those West Coast ties he brought. So, and that's not a knock on other guys. So I think Sark's done this multiple times. Now, can you upgrade from Tashard Choice? Now, I don't know if you can necessarily from that. I think he was a home run. I think he checked every boxes, whatever analogy you want to use. But there's a lot of really high-level coaches that want that position at Texas. I don't think Sark's going to have an issue finding a really capable, really talented coach in that position. The question I have is, what are going to be his requirements? Are they going to change from his requirements in his mind when he hired Tashard Choice? Or are they going to be different? Now, that's the question that he's going to have to answer. But look, Texas has made really good additions in their scouting and recruiting department in-house. And we talked about that on Friday's Longhorn live stream. Well, that's so important, Bobby. So he's continuing to make upgrades, I believe, within the program. And he does have to replace a really key piece in Tashard Choice. And I think maybe the most important piece he's had to replace since he's been here. But just one thing Sark's proven is he is more than capable of continuing this in this program with coaching additions, in-house recruiting, and staff decisions, and just continuing to keep this thing moving, hopefully towards winning that national championship.
It's clear he's using this opportunity, as are other coaches around the country, to bolster his staffs into a much more, I don't want to say professional type of staff, because that's not necessarily the way I want to look at it. Look, he no longer has a real bind or structure that he has to abide by. Previously, with new NCAA rules, you got 9 assistant coaches, and 9 assistant coaches went out on the road to recruit, and you were the 10th. And the NCAA has blown up all those rules. And so now different people can go out on the road. We saw this year, Chris Gilbert, for example, go out on the road, and was absolutely vital and key into signing Justice Terry, the defensive lineman out of Manchester, Georgia. Well, I mean, Chris Gilbert is the special assistant to the head coach. He's not a position coach, although he may end up one day. He was a running backs coach for a little bit at North Texas. So we'll see if he tries to dip his toes back and become the running back coach at Texas. My point being, you have that. You have Brandon Harris right now as the GM, who is out there hiring former general managers of other teams. Maybe they're a little bit lower conference level. The young coach out of Georgia Tech was the GM at Georgia Tech, Aaron Joe. Brandon Harris hired him. He's coming to Texas. Brandon Harris hired the GM at Memphis, Josh Brunson. He's coming to Texas as well. I think what's happening right now, Jerry, is how Sark is reconfiguring the entire staff. And at some level, there's no blueprint here. He's reimagining it, right? I mean, is that the feel you have at this point?
Yeah, I think so, and I do think it's going more professional model. Look, one of the things that I've talked about a lot recently, and you and I haven't really discussed it though, Bobby, is the coaches don't have as many days on the road from a recruiting standpoint as they used to. So your in-house staff, your scouting department, and that recruiting department have to be really, really good, because the days of spending a week in Tampa in Southwest Florida and hitting every high school to make sure you know where every player is down there is over. And if Texas is going to be a national program recruiting, which they are, you don't have time to do that anyways. I mean, Jeff Banks had to spend a whole day going to Brunswick to see Hezzy Kent. So you have to really be organized now. And the addition of Aaron Joe, Josh Dunson, both having Georgia and Florida ties, I think is crucial for Texas, because I expect them to recruit more players from those two states in the future. But you can't waste time because you don't have as many days. So you have to be extremely organized. You have to identify players. You have to make the calls ahead of time. You have to somewhat know if these guys are good fits before you ever send those coaches to these schools. So I think Sark is doing a really good job of expanding his recruiting and scouting department to where Texas has everything on point. So when they send Jeff Banks on the road, there's no wasted hours or moments or days for him on the road, because you don't have as many days anymore that you can spend on the road.
All right. I want to talk next, Jerry, about Mark Orphey, the new cornerbacks coach, and what we've learned about him in the last couple of days out of Rutgers, as well as what other assistants might be interviewing elsewhere this offseason for the Longhorns, and why that March 1 timeframe is so important. Before we do that, I want to say thank you to Laura Baker and the Andy Allen team over at Keller Williams. Laura has an open house this Saturday, today, from 1 to 3, 709 East 15th Street. That's in downtown Georgetown, old Georgetown area, 709 East 15th Street. Laura Baker, 512-784-0505. Just give her a call, 512-784-0505. Again, that's 709 East 15th Street in downtown Georgetown. Thanks, Laura and the Andy Allen team, for your sponsorship of Saturday morning's conversation on Texas football. All right, Jerry, let's go to Mark Orphey, the new defensive backs coach. He has not been officially announced, but we believe it has happened. He is going to be on staff at Texas. The question I have for you is he going to be the cornerbacks coach? Because that's what Terry Joseph coaches. Or is he going to be the safeties coach? Because that's ostensibly who he was taking over for from Blake Gideon. But he's really a corners coach.
Yeah.
What's going on behind the scenes here? And all the rigmarole here? Is Terry Joseph moving to safeties? What have you learned in that regard?
Yeah, I can go by one person that I talked to that I've had a lot of trust in, and everybody can be wrong at some point. But this guy's always steered me in the right direction. He says Orphey was hired to be the corners coach. Now, we have to wait until something official and the kind of everything shakes out with this defensive back staff, what is Steve Sarkisian's plans for it is. But Orphey accepted a job at Texas under the impression he was going to coach corners. That's what he coached at Rutgers, by the way. And I got to tell you, I like the hire. I really like the hire. It's not that he's a guy that would have been first on our radar, but in speaking with that person that has intimate knowledge on him, he's been an up and comer. He is a guy that was a sponge as a player that has transferred into his coaching. He's a guy that Greg Schiano loved up at Rutgers. He's also a guy that Greg Schiano threw down to recruit in Florida, Southwest Corridor of Florida, and in Atlanta area. So he's taken on, again, he fits the things we were just talking about with Texas expanding more recruiting efforts in Georgia and Florida. But then with Orphey, he's also a North Shore graduate. So he did recruit Texas as well. So maybe not very much at Rutgers, obviously. That's why he was in Florida, in Atlanta, in the Georgia area, in that state. But obviously he'll have some territory in Texas. Will he have the same territory Blake Gideon had? Because the loss of Blake Gideon to Georgia Tech isn't just you lost a safeties coach. He was the recruiter in the Houston area, Galveston County, up into that Shadow Creek, into those schools. Well, Fort Bend, which is very important. Texas had more success in Fort Bend than they've had. Well, Orphey, naturally, you would think he's going to recruit those areas, being from North Shore, as well as then go spot recruit in Florida in that Atlanta area as well. So I really like the hire. I like the person that knows him, has known him for, 15 years at this point, had great things to say about him and his trajectory and his work ethic and his ability to really, that he's taken what he's learned and taken it to coaching in the way he communicates. So I think it was a really strong hire. He wasn't a name that was ever going to be the first one out of anybody's mouth. But again, just like Kenny Baker was last year, Kenny Baker's proven to be a really strong hire by Steve Sarkisian. I believe Mark Orphey is the same.
I'm looking at it and just on its face, very similar hire to Kenny Baker.
Yep.
Very similar hire to Chris Jackson. Not many people heard these names. They weren't household names, etc. But when you look under the hood, they fit. And that seems to be what Sark's doing. I think he also stays a little young at certain positions too, on purpose. Orphey's still in his 30s. And I know you're not supposed to hire by age, but at some level, maybe that's what it takes to connect with younger people. We'll see exactly what that means. But again, I think he's also got some playing experience at not only at North Shore, but also was, I think, 2-time All-SWAC at Texas Southern as well. So we'll see what all that means. I think, to your point, it's very similar situation to Kenny Baker and maybe a little bit of Chris Jackson, although Chris Jackson was a wide receivers coach in the NFL for one full year before coming back down to college. All right, let's go next. Some other assistants we've talked about previous to this, and we've kind of soft pedaled this, I think, in fairness. I mentioned in January that at least 5 Texas coaches had been offered or talked about interviewing with pro teams. 5 Texas assistants. Now, we thought Texas got out of the woods with that when Tashard Choice told the Cowboys no. Okay. But the fact that he interviewed kind of shows that, hey, he might be willing. And then the Detroit Lions came back, which she has connection with because of Jahmyr Gibbs, and made another offer. The question I have, Jerry, is that just the expectation at some level? I mean, and I mean this with all due respect to everyone involved here. Is it the expectation that these guys, that's their job is to kind of go find another job at some level, even if they're very happy at Texas, because most coaches know they only have 3 to 5 years at a single place at most. And a lot of them early in their career are literally year to year. So what's your thought on assistants looking or talking to pro teams? Is that just part of the game in college football? In
I
theory?
think Rick Barnes used to say, if I don't have assistants that aspire to be head coaches, I have the wrong assistants, right? So I think there's that piece. And then I also think this, there's a D coordinator like PK who's been a D coordinator for many years, right? And he's pretty much a lifer as a DC at this point, right? Kyle Flood's already been a head coach at a Power 4 level. He's pretty much a lifer as a OL coach / OC unless he gets another head coaching job. But your guys who aren't there, that are younger, that are position coaches, I mean, Tashard Choice probably didn't get into college football coaching to be a 30-year running back coach. He doesn't seem like that's what he's after in this world. He probably wants to be a head coach one day. And so what's the path for him to get there? It's to build his resume the best he can. He added to a tremendous resume that now starts with his work at the University of Texas. Now he goes to the NFL. He will probably go back to college and be a coordinator or a head coach in the near future. So I think these guys take the steps they need to kind of maximize where they want to go and get to that point of being a head coach. And there's just very few guys who just get into this business just to be in a position coach, and they're fine with that, not have any upward trajectory. Very few. And honestly, if you're Steve Sarkisian, I don't think you want those guys unless it's an older coordinator who's that's what he is. You want guys that want to aspire to be head coaches because that's the motivation. I mean, how many guys were under Nick Saban and went on to be head coaches, whether they're successful or not? They got head coaching jobs or coordinator jobs. I think that's what you're after as a head coach. You want to hire really good people that other people are going to want to hire. If you have a staff of 10 guys and nobody wants to hire any of them, you're probably scratching your head every offseason.
Why are we seeing this run right now? And this is what I wanted to get at and talk to you a little bit. Right? I mean, there was that initial January run after Texas finished the season and positions were available, and those kind of coaches got filled up their roster spots. Well, this is what's happening, and I'm going to try to explain it for folks. Okay, March 1 is the date when most coaches get renewed. They get and their contracts get renewed. They expire, especially in the NFL, but most of it happens in the college ranks as well. And so you're waiting for that to transpire. So what happened is Texas, in my opinion, and their assistants took a lot of I talked to some folks in that January timeframe and kind of got through it all. But then when did the Lions come available? Well, their offensive coordinator took a job and their defensive coordinator took a job. And so there was a lot of jobs available with the Lions, right? You see now the New Orleans Saints. Well, they had to wait for their head coach until after the Super Bowl. So now there's more positions available at the New Orleans Saints that you're trying to see whether or not Texas may end up having some people interview it at there, or at least one. It's that March 1 timeframe, though, Jerry, that has led to this kind of second round of NFL possibilities for Texas, in my opinion. And I'll say this, it also is what Steve Sarkisian, because you're looking at the whole ecosystem, right? It's not just college football. These guys can coach pro football too. Yeah. And so that has elongated this process a little bit where you just don't know which way's up a little in some respects, in my opinion, as far as whether or not they're going to be available or take another job. And so here we are in middle of February 15th, and we're still waiting to hear maybe another assistant might go somewhere, might interview, might not, et cetera. Is that where you see it because of the Super Bowl and the March 1 time frame?
That's a good point. And that's a good point. And look, Sark also has at least, he has on paper right now, he has 2 defensive back coaches, Terry Joseph and Orphey. Last year, he had 3 with Scotty Hazelton as the Nichols coach. He still has a hire to make too. And I think the NFL, once the NFL jobs are all done, it's a lot easier for Sark to kind of navigate his process as well. Because look, if you're a guy that is in between jobs in the NFL, you're going to see if you can catch back on in the NFL, right? If somebody doesn't catch on in the NFL that he has interest in, that may end up being your Nichols coach. So I think it goes both ways. But I do think until all the NFL is taken care of, I think obviously Texas has coaches that are in demand, but Sark also has another hire, at least one hire to make. And his guy, the guy that he ideally wants, may be trying to get on an NFL team right now. And if that doesn't happen, then maybe that's when Sark fills out his coaching staff too.
I will say this: maybe Sark is waiting for this to go to finalize.
Yeah.
Because if you remember correctly, William Gay, remember him, was going to be the Texas DB coach for a little while. Right? Not the lead coach, because Blake Gideon and Terry Joseph were that. But 2 years ago, William Gay was going to join the staff, the former Pittsburgh Steeler. And within a week, he decided to go be an assistant DB coach in the NFL instead.
Yeah.
And so maybe Sark has kind of learned his lesson a little bit from that previous situation. All right. Jerry, anything else? Texas plays basketball against Kentucky later today. The women host LSU on Sunday in the Moody Coliseum. All right, in Moody. What do you think about Texas basketball, men and women, heading into today and tomorrow?
I mean, men are in a must-win situation, and in Kentucky they're not the toughest team physically as Pope builds his roster, but Coach Pope, but he's a great offensive coach. So you're going to have to score the ball. I mean, Texas is in a must-win situation, and now I want to say this: making the tournament and Rodney Terry's job security, I think, are even two different things. For the team, you got to get the 8 wins to go 8-10 to get in the NCAA tournament. But I'm not sure what that does for Rodney Terry. That's a different discussion. But for the team itself, what we're talking about right now, they're in a must-win situation. They need a win over Kentucky because they had built their resume pretty strongly with those 3 quad 1 wins in 4 games at Oklahoma. Then they lost at Florida, and they came back and beat A&M in Missouri, and then they've just given it all away with 3 straight losses, all quad 1s. So they need to win this game Saturday for NCAA tournament purposes. If they take on another loss, man, they're taking on some water at that point. Then they have a week off, and they're on a 4-game losing streak. Then they go to South Carolina, who hadn't beaten anybody this year, so they're due. So then it gets really tricky. If they don't win, they don't beat Kentucky, it gets tricky to see the 8-10 path to 8-10. With the women's, it's pretty simple. If they beat LSU Sunday, I'll be surprised if they're not a 1 seed because they have stacked quad 1 wins. I think they have 9, the second most of South Carolina. That would be 10, actually maybe 10. Yeah, that would be 10th over LSU. And they probably still have a couple of quad 1 wins left in there somewhere. If Texas beats LSU, they have a real inside track on a 1 seed. And some people are like, well, does it really matter if you're 1 or 2? I think it matters. So look, you always want to be a 1 seed. That means you've had a great season, first of all. And there's things that come with all of that. And from a recruiting standpoint and expectation standpoint, because the expectations for this Texas women's team was to be a Final Four team this year. And if they're a 1 seed, they've fulfilled that expectation headed into the NCAA tournament. Then you see what the matchups looks like.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see what Steve Sarkisian does about his coaches, what the basketball team does later today, as well as tomorrow with the women too. So, but I want to finish with this final thought. Steve Sarkisian and Texas football aren't going to fold tent because of an assistant coach leaving. The idea here, Texas still has really good football players, going to go get some more and got to find guys that fit Steve Sarkisian's culture. I think that ultimately is it. That's why it may take him. He may not go after the biggest name at the defensive line coach with Kenny Baker. Was not the biggest name. Chris Jackson was not the biggest name at wide receivers. Mark Orphey was not the biggest name at cornerbacks. See what Sark ends up and decides to do, because I think culture matters to him. He thinks there are good coaches out there. He's got to find the right fit. All right. Yep. For Gerry Hamilton, I'm Bobby Burton. Thanks again to Laura Baker and the Andy Allen team. Once again, she has that open house later today from 1 to 3 over in Georgetown, 709 East 15th Street. Give Laura a call, 512-784-0505. For Gerry Hamilton, I'm Bobby Burton. You guys have a good Saturday. Hook 'em.